A person who values health but keeps smoking may not say, "I am acting against my own belief." They may say the habit lowers stress, or that one small habit cannot matter much. Cognitive dissonance is the mental strain that appears when belief, behavior, and self-image do not fit together. The simplest way to understand cognitive dissonance is to look for a conflict inside the person, not only a conflict between people. Someone wants to feel honest, wise, loyal, or disciplined, but their action points in another direction. The mind then searches for a story that reduces the discomfort. The need to protect self-image can make the surface story look simpler than the real situation. The discomfort is emotional before it is logical. It can feel like embarrassment, defensiveness, irritation, or a sudden need to prove a point. That is why a calm fact may be rejected quickly when it threatens the version of the self the person is trying to protect. Defensive speed is often the detail that separates a quick reaction from a wiser response. A buyer who overpays for an online course may keep praising it even after realizing the lessons are weak. Admitting the mistake would mean accepting wasted money and poor judgment. Defending the purchase protects pride, even if it blocks a better decision later. Selective evidence shapes what should be checked next. People often reduce dissonance by changing the explanation instead of changing the behavior. A student who cheats may say the exam was unfair. A worker who dislikes a policy may defend it after helping enforce it. The story lowers tension, but it can also hide the real problem. The shame attached to admitting error turns the idea into something practical rather than only theoretical. Dissonance is not the same as ordinary lying. A person may partly believe the excuse while also avoiding the deeper truth. That mixed state is what makes the pattern confusing. From the outside it looks dishonest. From the inside it may feel like survival. The story that makes the action feel acceptable deserves attention before the choice becomes harder to reverse. Confirmation bias can feed dissonance. Once someone has defended a decision, they may search for proof that supports it and ignore proof that challenges it. A bad investment becomes, "still early." A damaged friendship becomes, "they are too sensitive." Identity threat can quietly move the cost from the present moment into the future. The stronger the identity attached to a belief, the harder the dissonance becomes. A careful person struggles more when careless behavior is exposed. A fair person struggles more when they benefit from unfairness. The mind protects identity almost as strongly as it protects comfort. Public pride helps explain why the obvious answer may not be the best answer. Small contradictions are usually easier to repair than old ones. Saying, "I handled that badly," after one mistake is difficult but possible. Saying it after years of defending the same behavior can feel like watching an entire personal story collapse. Private discomfort gives the situation its real-world weight. A useful self-check is to compare repeated behavior with stated values. If someone says family matters most but repeatedly gives family only leftover attention, the gap deserves attention. The question is not shame. The question is what the pattern is trying to avoid. The cost of keeping the excuse is worth checking when the first explanation feels too neat. The repair often starts with a smaller admission than people expect. Instead of declaring the whole identity false, the person can say, "I wanted to believe this was working, but the evidence is different." That sentence reduces the need to keep defending the old story. Small admissions can decide whether the problem stays small or grows into a pattern. Dissonance can also appear in groups. A team that claims to value honesty may punish the person who brings bad news. The group then explains the punishment as loyalty or positivity. The contradiction remains, even if everyone learns not to name it. Group loyalty pressure keeps the analysis tied to behavior, money, timing, risk, or trust. In relationships, dissonance appears when someone says they want closeness but repeatedly chooses distance. They may describe themselves as independent, busy, or misunderstood. Those labels may be partly true, but they can also protect the person from admitting fear. Relationship distance belongs in the decision because it changes what action would help. In money decisions, dissonance appears when someone says they hate debt while using credit to maintain status. The spending is not only financial, it also protects an image. That is why a budget alone may not fix the pattern unless the emotional reward is addressed. Status spending becomes more reliable when it appears more than once. Facts help, but facts alone may not be enough. If the fact threatens identity, the person may attack the messenger, change the subject, or demand impossible proof. A better conversation lowers humiliation while still staying honest about the contradiction. Facts that feel humiliating should be checked before accepting the most comfortable explanation. A practical way to use the idea is to watch for defensive explanations that arrive too fast. Quick certainty can be a clue. When the answer appears before the person has really looked at the evidence, the mind may be protecting comfort more than truth. Fast certainty needs to be connected with the actual consequence. The goal is not to accuse every contradiction of being dissonance. Humans are complicated, and one inconsistent moment does not define a person. The pattern matters most when the same excuse keeps returning and the cost keeps growing. Repeated contradictions keeps the topic grounded in daily life. A healthier response is to make the next action smaller and more honest. Cancel one unnecessary purchase. Apologize for one avoided truth. Ask one uncomfortable question. Small alignment reduces the pressure to keep building bigger defenses. Small honest repairs can be found in behavior, documents, timing, or repeated choices. Cognitive dissonance matters because it explains why smart people defend choices that are hurting them. The issue is not intelligence. It is the pain of seeing a gap between the person we claim to be and the choices we are making. Protected identity makes the issue easier to name in plain words. The useful takeaway is simple. When a decision feels strangely hard to question, look for the identity being protected. If the story and the evidence are fighting each other, the way forward is not more defensiveness. It is a small act of honesty that brings belief and behavior closer together. A simple way to spot cognitive dissonance is to listen for explanations that arrive too quickly. A person may say, "I had no choice," even when choices existed, or, "It was not a big deal," when the cost was real. The issue is not one defensive sentence. The issue is a pattern where the mind keeps protecting pride instead of checking reality. In daily life, this can appear after overspending, staying in a bad job, defending a rude comment, or refusing to admit a habit is causing harm. One reason cognitive dissonance is hard to notice is that the explanation often sounds reasonable from the inside. The smoker really may feel less stressed after a cigarette. The buyer really may find one useful lesson in the overpriced course. The employee really may have reasons for staying in a job they dislike. Dissonance usually hides inside explanations that contain some truth but leave out the larger contradiction. Dissonance becomes less frightening when the correction is small. Someone who has been defending an expensive purchase does not have to call themselves foolish. They can simply say, "This did not give me what I expected, stop adding more money to it, and learn from the mistake." That small admission protects the future without turning the past into a personal attack. That is why self-honesty has to be specific. Instead of asking, "Am I a hypocrite?" a better question is, "Where are my actions not matching what I say matters to me?" That question is less dramatic and more useful. It turns shame into information. In relationships, the repair may be even smaller but more meaningful. Someone who says they value honesty can admit one avoided truth. Someone who says they care can make one consistent action match the words. The point is not to become perfectly consistent overnight. The point is to stop using excuses as a wall between self-image and behavior. Cognitive dissonance matters because it explains why smart, sincere people sometimes defend choices that are hurting them. The mind is not only solving problems, it is also protecting identity. Once that protection is noticed, the person can choose honesty without needing to collapse into shame. That is where real change begins.